So, welcome to today's book club, which is The Way of the Seabhean by Amantha Murphy. Really excited to have Amantha on today. Oh, fabulous. Everyone's got their copies with them.
Me too.
Oh, fabulous. And I wore green in honor of it. Last time I wore this dress was St. Patrick's Day Parade. So there we go. So really excited to have Amantha on. And both of us have this experience of having lived in England and in Ireland in our adult lives, but coming originally from Irish family stock. So there aren't that many of us I know who have that shared heritage. So I'd love to talk to you about that a bit later on. But would you like to introduce yourself to everybody here so they know who you are and what you do?
Sure. So hi, everybody. As you can see that I'm Amantha, and I had my birthday yesterday.
Oh, happy
So
birthday.
thank you. So I came onto this planet 72 years ago of Irish parents in a very strong Irish community, and spent all my summers and some of the Christmases here where I live now with my grandmother. This was her land and it was her mother's land. And as far as we know, it goes back to her mother. We can't really go back any further at the moment. But this was always my soul home, the place that held me, supported me. And I grew up seeing spirit. To me, there were these two light beings that used to come to me and always were there. And I used to play with the fairies and talk to the stone people, and Granny would tell stories. We'd sit out in the field and she'd be telling the stories, or in the evenings when her friends would come around. And for me, being a dyslexic at a time when people didn't know about dyslexia, that's what fed me. That's what really supported me in life. I found living in London during term time, even though it was a very strong Irish community, I found it very difficult because people didn't seem to be awake for me. They seemed to be asleep, and I didn't know how to handle that. It was quite frightening. I felt it was quite frightening. And I went to school with nuns all the way through till I was 16. I had a little part in the middle where it wasn't nuns, but before the beginning and the end were nuns. And I was very blessed with the nuns I had as a teenager. I loved my nuns. They were the ones with the wings. And they were very kind. They were very good women. And I ended up working with them at weekends. They had two orphanages, one inside London, one outside London. And I used to work there, and they had a home for the deaf and dumb, and they had a place for the homeless. And I used to work there with them as well. And I love these women, not because of the praying. I never really got into that part. I never got into the Jesus bit. But I love them for their kindness and their givingness. And they really taught me what spirituality was, which was a real blessing. So I had an eye operation for double vision when I was 12, and I stopped seeing spirit until I was 16, when we actually got a man in the convent school, which was so exciting until we saw him, bless him. And he certainly wasn't picked for his looks, let's say that, but he was the most amazing maths teacher, and maths was my subject all the way through. From the time I started school at the age of 5, got my first prize at the age of 6 for good mental work. And he was the only one that stretched me in maths. And he gave me an exercise myself and another woman, Eileen Herlihy, one Friday evening, which was 3 lots of 3 dots. And I think this is in the book. And you have to join all the dots together without crossing a line. And I worked on it all weekend, and I came back on the Monday, and even though I was very quiet and shy at school, I was quite open with him because I was comfortable with him, and I really enjoyed him stretching me mentally on mathematics. And I went up to him at the desk and I looked up at him and I said, "It can't be done." And he just smiled down at me, and I found myself getting a bit irritated. And I said, "It can't be done." And again, he didn't say anything, he just smiled. And I said, "Look, the only way you can do it is to go outside of the lines, to go outside of the dots." And he just looked at me and he quietly said, "No one ever told you you had to stay inside the square." And I didn't know, I was flabbergasted. I just stood there And I felt like I'd been swimming underwater for so long that I forgot I was underwater. And every now and then I could hear the other girls talking, please, sir, me, sir, and I could see him looking over. And I've no idea, even now, how long I stood there. But within 24 hours, I was back talking to Spirit again. And it was as if he'd given me permission to step outside of the box again. And so, of course, within weeks, I was involved in all these, spiritually psychic things like, I don't know, levitation, and they were doing the Ouija board at the back of the maths class, and he couldn't do anything about it. And I didn't want to put my finger on it. Last thing I wanted to know was how many children I was going to have and that sort of thing. And it would only work after a while if I was in the room. If I wasn't in the room, it wouldn't work. And at the time, I believed it was mind over matter. But I couldn't get away from it, especially now that it was all back and I was listening and hearing spirit again. And I used to think everybody had this inner voice where, it would tell them what was good and what was bad. We had films on it in the late 50s and 60s, the good angel and the bad angel. And so I thought everybody had it. It wasn't until I met a medium and she said to me, no, other people don't have that. And within weeks, she had me working in what was called spiritual churches in England at the time. And I remember coming home to my granny and talking to my grandmother about it. And she'd never left Kerry. She'd never left County Kerry. I mean, she hadn't really left more than, say, 40 miles around where I am now. And she said to me, oh, sure, she said, sure, my husband used to come and talk to me, she said, after he passed over. He'd come to the window and we'd have a great chat. But after a year and a day, he had to go. I had to leave him. I had to let him go. And I thought, my goodness, this woman sitting here at the fire, and she's so wise. She's so wise. She knows so much. It's amazing. And so that began my other journey. And so my whole life has been in that field in one way or another. And I was still very self-conscious because of the dyslexia, not knowing what it was. Married young, married as a hippie. My husband sang in a band. And then around the age of 22, 23, when I had my first child, after I had my first child, Spirit said to me, you can no longer develop and take drugs. Because of course I was smoking dope, taking mushrooms, loving mushrooms. And I realized that I had to clean up my act. I had to clean up my life. And of course, that began the process of my separation with my first husband. But I went on to be working with other people. And when I was 16, I had always thought I'd come back and live with my granny here and work with her. And this energy in the land that I'd always called she or her, this old woman that used to talk to me since I was a babe, she came to me at 16 when I was lying on the grass out here outside. And she said to me, you cannot stay. You have to go. You have to learn. And at the time, it broke my heart. I found it very hard to come back. It took me a few years before I did come back again because I didn't know how I was going to cope. This was the only place I felt real. I felt like I was just playing a game, an act, hiding and caring for myself, But here I could be who I was, and I could run in the fields and talk to the trees and play with the fairies and, part of the stories. The fabric of the land was the fabric of my body. And I didn't know how I could cope not having that. But then gradually I started coming back. And then in my early 30s, I went to a Hopi reservation. I had met a guy up in Findhorn that we'd become friends, although at the time I thought he was very strange, but he kind of followed me back to London, and I was living in community at the time, and he ended up living with us for a few months, and he was adopted by Grandfather David, the spiritual head of the Hopis. And so Robert used to write to me, and suddenly there was no letters, and so we were in America, and I said I wanted to go and see how Robert was, and we went there, and he had died, bless him. And I met Grandfather David's wife. Grandfather David was actually not there at the time, but I met his wife, and she was just like my granny. We sat on boxes, and my granny had a thing about boxes. People would walk in with a box of food or a box of potatoes or whatever, and she'd always go, "Oh, Jesus, that's a great box," and you knew that she wanted that box, you know. And so this woman reminded me of my grandmother, and the hair reminded me of my grandmother. And so we're there, and then this older woman comes in, and she comes over to me, and she was only about the size of my granny, and she started poking me in the chest, and she said to me, "Why are you here? Why are you here? You're not supposed to be here. You carry your people's stories. You carry your people's traditions. You're meant to be on your own land." And I realized that was true. That was exactly what I was meant to be doing. And so that began my journey back home. That began to bring me back here to my land and to my stories. And so gradually I began to weave myself back. And then in 1997, I moved back full time. And I brought my two youngest with me. I have 4 children, so 2 lots of 2 from 2 marriages. And so my 2 younger ones grew up going to school here. And I started working with the land. Again, I started sharing it with people. And that brought us on and on. And before I came back, I'd lived in community and I'd been working a lot in Europe. And then when I got pregnant with my 3rd child, with my second husband, his first, I very much stayed focused in the community. And I found that quite difficult. And I was told that I would come back and I would work. And I thought that meant when I retired. I didn't at the time think that it was going to be before that. And so when I came back, it all began to open up again for me. I did my first pilgrimage here in 95, 2 years before I moved back. And I've been doing the pilgrimages on the land since 1995, except for, of course, the COVID times. But everything has brought me back here. This is my soul home. This land is my land. It's where my soul resides, and it's where I will reside on my next adventure, where my body will reside as I journey on too. So that's really who I am. Mother of 4, grandmother of 4.
Thank you. I feel exactly the same about the land here in Shanagari. It just, my family first came here in the 1930s and have, with my kids are the 4th generation here, and it just, this land is my soul home, and it just is where I need to be. You know, if I were to choose with my head, I'd probably choose to be in West Cork rather than East Cork. There'd be far more like-minded people. But there is just something about this place that I belong to, and it belongs to me. And we kind of sealed the deal because all 3 of my children were born at home, and we buried their placentas in the ground. So it's like we've grounded another generation here.
How lovely.
So I'd love to start off with reading a little bit from the beginning of the book, because the word Seabhean is new to most people, I'd say. And so I just want to read your introduction to who she is. The Seabhean is the Irish female shaman, healer, and seer, the woman who walks between worlds. She is able to move betwixt and between realities, to bring back information that is needed for her people. The Seabhean is held in high regard in her community. This role has been passed down through the female line in families since ancient times. The Seabhean is the woman who holds the presence of the weave of life and is conscious of the roles of all people, of nature, and of the planet, and our intricate role within that. She does not interfere or seek to control, but to bring balance, assisting in balancing the weave on a personal level with people, and on an earth level with nature and with our Great Mother. On a planetary level, she assists with our role in balancing the great weave of our multiverse. These women have existed throughout time, often unrecognized and unknown by others. They are not particular to Ireland, although I am talking about our tradition here. These women were and are all over the world. Some know what they are doing. Others are not necessarily aware of what they carry and how they touch gently into the weave with other people. They do not seek personal recognition. Their work is for the benefit of their communities and the world. Often, over the centuries, the shamanic practices of the Seabhean have been misunderstood and misinterpreted. Across the world, hundreds of thousands of women were killed in witch hunts. Many of these women were healers, midwives, and herbalists. Some were women who had power or positions or who wanted to sell land. This violence against women caused a great closing, a great silence. Women's voices and women themselves were closed down. The ancient women's practices became hidden and secret. And so your work is in revealing these, in sharing these, in bringing them back to life. Would that be right?
Yes, yes, and it's also helping women to find what their medicine is, what their voice, and how to bring that forth for themselves. So I see really the work that I do as a way of assisting women to find their own tools, to find who they are, to have a voice, to claim their voice, and to claim their sound, to claim the energy, the vibration of who they are, so that they can live in the entirety of that. And we carry our foremothers within us. We carry them in our body, we carry them in our blood, we carry them in our bones, and we carry their stories. We carry them all the way back through time and space. And the more we awaken who we are, the more we awaken all the presence of those foremothers and the gifts that they can bring us. And we don't have to go through the same experiences. If we can acknowledge the experiences of our foremothers, embrace the experiences of our foremothers, release the pain of some of those experiences, and take on the knowing, the growing of what they went through as well. So for me, it's really a tool in assisting women to become who they are meant to be and more. Yeah.
So how did you discover or come across, or whatever the right term is, this word?
So I was working, and I had a friend at the time, Grania O'Maraku, who lived outside of North Dublin. And I had met her, actually, she was in one of my very first pilgrimages in '95. And a lovely soul, a beautiful soul. She was a widow and she had worked for many years. Her and her husband used to have a school of Irish, and they were both teachers. But in the summertime, they would run a school of Irish for the children in the greater Dublin area, because that was often a subject that was difficult for them, not living in an environment where there was Irish spoken. And so Grania had asked me to come up and work through her house. And I've done that. I did that 2 or 3 times. And then the third time, I think it was, I was there, we were having dinner. And she said to me, "So Amantha, this work you do, what do you actually call it?" And I said to her, "Do you know, Grania, I don't have a word. I haven't hit a word that has resonated with me." And she's looking at me and she says, "Sure, you're a Shavan." And as soon as she said it, it resonated. And I was already using the Shah in the work. And so it just seemed to be, of course, you know. And so that's how the word emerged. So she said it came from Donegal. She herself was I think she was a Connemara woman. She said that the word came originally from Donegal. Yeah.
And you were going to read a little bit about the yes woman. That would be a really good
Yes.
time to weave that in, because Sha
Okay.
means yes and Van
Yes.
means woman.
Yeah. Yes. And it's the nearest word really we have to yes. It's more like yes, it is. Yes, it can be. Yeah. It's that nearest word we have to yes, because of course in the Irish we have so many more words to explain things. You know, it's much more colourful, the language. And I have an ache that I don't have Irish. I would have loved to. My mother, when they lost the farm here, my mother was just coming up to 16. and her father had died, and they lost the farm, which was supposed to go to her. And so she went to Dublin to work, and she was a very, very quiet woman, very shy. I know now from my daughters telling me that she was, you know, obviously in the spectrum, because of her innate shyness and difficulty in talking to people she didn't know, you know. But she went to Dublin anyway to work. She was 4'6", and they made fun of her because Irish was her first language, and at the time it was seen as a poor person's language. And so she swore to herself that she would never let her children learn it because she didn't want them to be seen as poor.
And
so
now
sometimes
it's like, you know, it's the ultimate.
the opposite.
Well, everyone has to learn it in Ireland until you're 18, until you leave school. You have to do it as one of your subjects in your, it's called a leaving cert. And we've got Irish language television, Irish language radio, and it very much is cool and having a moment. And you really do feel like, as somebody who doesn't speak it but who lives here, I always feel like I really would love to be able to understand it for the poetry and for the songs.
Yes.
I feel like I miss that.
Yeah. And also because I know with my own children, if you have a specific learning difficulty, you didn't have to learn it.
Yeah, so one of my children isn't.
Yes, so in that way, yeah. But I understand it. So I'm sad for it, but I also really honor my mother because she was such a good woman, you know. So she did what she thought was the best. So the yes woman. By following the way of the Seabhean, yes woman, we say yes to life and to what is thrown at us. Yes, let's go for it. Let us eat and drink of life rather than being observers. We do this in the way of hundreds of thousands of women who have walked this path before us. The way of the Seabhean is a path of power, passion, and grace. We are brought up to fear power as women and to give it away to the priest, the doctor, the teacher, our father, or our husband. On this path, we reclaim our power. Passion is life force. It is our fire, awakening to being passionate about anything. Nature, dance, music, movements to bring about change, or a passion for life itself activates that life force and lets us know that indeed we are alive. It is in the presence of grace that enables us to hold our space. Women have always sat together in circle. They often find their own personal power when they sit in circles with other women. Should I keep on, or is that?
If you would like to, and if you don't, that's good.
Okay. All over the world, women are fighting to be heard and to be seen as equals in their work and in their lives. We carry this within us, the desire to stand in our power as women. To do this, we can draw upon our own inner Seabhean. This is our opportunity to stand in our proper place in and upon this world. We have the word Shah and we use it. We are saying yes. By saying that, we are building up positive energy. Yes, we will take back our power. Yes, we will live in our authenticity. Yes, we are women, and we do not try to be other than what is said and who we are in our sacredness and in our wildness.
Oh, I'm really glad you carried on. That's yeah. Thank you. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how the book came about, bearing in mind you're dyslexic, and so obviously writing must be a challenge.
It's certainly not my forte. I can talk for Ireland, I've learned. But in the year 2000, my mother died. I had her here for the last few months. So she died where she grew up, bless her. And then I was 50. And on my 50th birthday, I had this great party. I like my birthday. I like to have a good time on my birthday. And so we had this great party at a friend's house, and she had her husband and herself, they had these very big rooms. And so in one room we had traditional music going, and in another room we had disco music going, and it was just real fun, you know. And I was also realizing I was now the matriarch of the family, because my mother was a matriarch, even though she was very quiet and shy. She was definitely holding the reins, you know, and I could feel that shifting and changing coming to me. And here I was in my 50th, and coming up to near midnight, everybody made a big circle and had me in the center, and they all danced and sang around me. And it was just so beautiful, you know, and it was so heart filling. And I suddenly felt so strongly that, you know, I have walked this spiral path coming out in life, and suddenly at 50, I'm starting to walk around back the other way. I'm starting to move in a new direction.
Mm.
And I felt so strongly that I didn't want to die with this knowing, these teachings that were through me, coming through me, you know. I didn't want them to go down again into the realms of the ancestors, to be there waiting for generations to come. I wanted it to come out. I wanted it to be shared. And of course, I started speaking about that. And then people kept saying to me, oh, you should write a book. Oh, Amantha, you know. And I kept saying, oh, I'll write a book. But of course, I never, and many times I sat down to try and do it, you know. But my hand actually physically freezes holding a pen.
Mm.
I like to use bigger pens because otherwise they stiffen up. And I realized it took a long time, many years, before I realized I was never going to put pen to paper. And so then when I met Orla, and I knew Orla for a few years, we both worked in something called the Wise Woman Weekend, which was a not-for-profit weekend held every year in Ireland, normally at Lunasa. And I was doing a workshop on the myths of the deities, the female deities of the wheel. And what I was doing was I was telling the story, and then I was playing music and having them move and dance to the energy of the story. And afterwards, she came over to me, and I knew Orla was an author. And she said to me, Amantha, you have to write these stories down. You have to write these stories down. And I looked at her and I said, Orla, I need my teachings written down first. Would you do that first? And she went, oh, sure, that'll only take 8 months or 18 months at the most, you know. And then 4 years later, we were still compiling it, you know. So what I did was I actually recorded my workshops, and I asked permission of the people in the workshop to record, and I would not keep any of their personal stories, which we didn't. And so then I gave the recordings to Orla, and she typed them up. And then we literally put them all on the floor according to, you know, the wheel, the deities, the different things like that. And then we just went through the whole thing, and we copy and pasted bits from here and bits from there. And it was a long process. And, you know, Orla, it just, I couldn't say enough about her, how good she was, incredible. How she was able to put it together, and how she was able to take it from the spoken word into the written word.
Mm.
Quite amazing, quite amazing. Yeah.
Mm.
And
And it's
people who know me, people who have worked with me, will say when they read the book that they can hear me in it.
mm. Well, it's just so I think inspiring for people to hear that there's more than one way to write a book, and also that book writing in the Western world is very much a one person by themselves thing, and actually creating together, compiling together is a really powerful thing. Sarah and I worked together on the Kitchen Witch Companion, and it was just so much fun to put a book together rather than, now obviously we were in a slightly different situation in that it was just your voice that she was kind of helping to weave, but just that thing of collaborating on creating a book is a special process. And you know, you're not by yourself is always the nice thing. You've got somebody to run, you know, ideas, thoughts, worries past. You don't get stuck, I think, quite as easily when you've got somebody else there who's working the material as well.
Yeah, and she'd pick me up on things sometimes, I remember one, she was here because we'd do whole week-longs together. She'd come down to me for a week here in Kerry, or I'd go up to her in Sligo for a week, and, so we were putting this together, and she said, "Amantha, I need to change what you've put here." And I said, "What?" She says, "Well," she said, what you've put is so Kerry, read it out." And I said, "Well, I put myself to bed." And she went, "You can't say you put yourself to bed." And I went, "Well, I did." And she went, "No, you went to bed. You didn't put yourself to bed." And I couldn't get it. I was thinking, "No, but isn't it the same thing?" And she said, "No, it isn't." So things like that really made us laugh, that
Mm.
we pick things up like that.
So tell me, the book is a real weaving of
Yes.
your kind of more contemporary practice and ancient Irish stuff, a whole kind of wonderful mix of these. And we chose the tagline, an Irish shamanic path, and we went backwards and forwards on that. And I pushed, you reminded me, I pushed to say, let's have that there to try and explain what it is. We also I wondered if it should be Celtic, because Celtic is something that, I certainly to the American market would be something more commonly used in books of Irish stroke Celtic spirituality, rather than just honing in on Ireland. And you were like, nope, it has to be Irish, not Celtic. So I'd really love you to unpack both of those, because they're both words that are used a lot in wisdom teaching, and yet can be contentious for
Yes.
some people.
Yes.
Some people love the term shamanic, and some people are like, no, it can only be used for the, oh, is it Mongolian? It's up north.
Siberian.
Siberian, just them,
Yeah.
and everybody else has to find a different word. And yet it's become a generic and general word used for indigenous practices, one that everybody understands, and yet there is this big issue around it in terms of cultural appropriation. So
Yes.
go.
Well, I think you said it all there, Lucy, really. It is indigenous. For me, the word shamanic will bring me straight away to the feeling of something that is indigenous. And so for me, these teachings have come through me and from me. They've come from the trees, and they've come from my own bloodline.
Mm.
And sometimes I didn't know which would be which, but it didn't seem to matter. It would just come through. And I know when I can feel that happening, it's an indigenous teaching that is there. And I feel that it goes way, way back through time. So that's why I didn't want it labeled Celtic, because the Celts came around 265 BC, give or take a few years on either side, I'm sure. And I feel these teachings go way, way back beyond that. And when you look at our deities, Maeve, for example, because this is her time now, of course, Bealtaine, but Maeve, homage to Maeve goes back 5,000 years. And so this is something that is much older. This is part of the fabric. It is the fabric of the land. For me, these teachings are part of the fabric of the land. And so to me, it has that indigenous nature, it's that indigenous energy.
And that's
Um,
something that
and
in modern Western thought, philosophy, spirituality, we just don't have a concept of things coming through the land through to us. We just don't have that. Things are knowledge in the modern Western tradition is disembodied, and it is not of the land. It is something, ideas that happen in our heads. And
yeah.
so what you are harking back to is a way of knowing
Yes.
that is ancient and that
Yes.
all human cultures have.
Yes. Yes. And knowledge can be empty without wisdom.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. And wisdom leads us into understanding.
Mm.
Knowledge can actually be used in many ways, good and bad, unless one has the understanding behind it.
Mm.
But you say about, it comes from the mind, but things move through our mind like this. You can have thoughts upon thoughts upon thoughts. You go and lie on the earth, You feel her body beneath you. You feel the grass, you know, beneath your feet and pushing up through your fingers. You listen to the birds. I was out there today and listening to the birds, and there was one bird I thought, I haven't heard that song before. And what bird is that? That's really interesting, you know. And yesterday, for my birthday, we went to Valencia Island, and
Lovely.
it was a bouquet of flowers everywhere we went. And I sat in one place and we were looking down at the sea, and a bee came along, and the bee was busy doing its work. And it's like, this is life. We will come and we will go. But this, the earth, the beauty, the movement of nature, the movement of the seasons will come and go. And they are more solid than we are.
Mm. So is
And
this what
so,
you refer to as the weave?
to me, the weave, I see the weave as a fabric around the earth, and that each one of us is a part of that weave, and that each one of us is a part of the earth. And as we grow, as we evolve, as we become more conscious, as we live more in the presence of the I am, which means being fully cognizant and consciousness within every living moment, the more we move into that space, the more we are feeding that into the weave, and the more others can draw from it. Because we have seen it time and time again. There are so many examples now of when one person can do something, then suddenly other people can start doing it. And then hundreds can do it, and then thousands can do it. And so when we shift our awareness, our consciousness, and we begin to live more in the presence of self and our interconnectedness, then we are feeding into that great weave. And that is feeding the whole of humanity. And that is also reflecting to our mother planet. This earth, this home that we live on, she gives us food, she gives us water, she gives us beauty. And so when we are, you know, if we're out of balance and we allow ourselves to get caught up in reactions and fear and pain and anger, especially anger, that also is going into the weave. So the more we can hold ourselves in the presence of self and not get caught up in what's going on around us, but actually recognize it, stand for what is true, but without getting caught up in the emotional interplay of it, the more we are feeding into the weave. And for me, the more I see that, the more I recognize, actually, out of everything I do in life, this is the most important thing, because we here now are creating a new earth. All of everything we do, all our dreams, everything we work towards, everything we aspire, everything we dream is part of the dream that our descendants will live within. We are the seeds of the seeds of the seeds. Our dreams, all that we hold for the presence of life on this planet, of human life on this planet, as well as the life of our brethren, whether it's our brethren plants or our brethren animals, all that we hold and dream, we are holding within the fabric of that weave. And it might take generations, and it will, because everything has to change. We are in a place of chaos. But it needs to be, because things need to be broken down and things need to be broken into. We're moving through it. We can't move on from it. We have to move through it. That's how we progress. That's how we grow, by moving through things. And that's what's happening now. And so the more we hold the presence of our awareness of self and our interconnectedness with all within the weave, the more we're feeding into the growth of what will be.
Beautiful. Thank you, Amantha. I'd like to invite at this point questions. I feel like it's a really good point to invite. Just unmute yourself. We've got questions from Sarah here. Sorry, my Mouse is being annoying. There we go. Sarah has two questions. You've obviously traveled to many wonderful places in Ireland, and Sarah is currently writing about traveling and nature and the countryside and the stories that are held in the countryside. Do you have a favorite or special place that you haven't mentioned yet? And is there anywhere on your wish list that you've not yet been to?
Do I have a favorite place? It's hard to say because I love so many places. But one of my favorite, I suppose, would be Scotia's Grave.
Haven't heard of that at
And
all.
Scotia is outside of Tralee, and Scotia was an Egyptian princess who was married to one of the sons of the Milesians, the first Celts who came to Ireland. So when the first Celts came, the first tribe that came were called the Milesians, and the king of the Milesians had 7 sons. One of them was Armagon. And they wanted to come to Ireland. They were desirous to reach Ireland because they had heard about this land of myth and magic, this land of apples that had been caught. And so they asked their father if they could come over here. It said that from a very high tower in Spain, they could see the outline of this land. And he said, you can go, but each of you have to build your own boat. So if something happens to one of you, the others will be safe. And I could go into the whole story of it, but I'd probably be a bit, might be taking us off the point here. So anyway, so they came, and Scotia's husband died, but Scotia landed in Tralee. And she was an Egyptian princess well versed in magic. And Fola, one of the 3 princesses of the Tuatha Danann, fought with her there. And she died there. And it's said, such was her magic that even in death she wielded great power. And so in our stories here in Kerry, we know that they called upon the earth, the Tuatha. And they called upon the earth and they called upon the stone. And this huge stone lifted up out of the ground, and her body was laid down and the stone dropped above it, above her, to keep her energy down into the ground. And it said that 33 of the greatest of the Tuatha Danann threw down their lives around the grave to protect the grave. Now, I grew up with that story, and actually it was my father who told me that story. My father was from Wexford. Now, my father he was a good storyteller in that you never know what was real and what wasn't, what was truth and what wasn't, And they say, never let truth get in the way of a good story. So I never knew if this was real or not. So I decided to research it years back. And my dear friend down the road who died last year, his son came with me, Kevin, and we went off to Tralee Library. And I found a book, a little book, and I wasn't allowed to take it because it was an old book, but they photocopied a page where it was talking about mining the amethysts, which used to be called the Kerry diamonds in those days. And it was done opposite Scotia's Grave. And so I went off with this thinking I was going to find this place. Kevin and I went off driving. Of course, everything's changed since the 1930s. There are roads where there were never roads before, and houses, where there were never houses before. But anyway, in the long and short story, I got it. I found the place, and we went down, and you have to cross the stream 3 times. So there already, you know that you're moving into a very special place, a very sacred place, because you're having to cross 3 times. You're crossing the stream of consciousness. You have to let something go before you can step into the next level. And then you move again. And between the second and the third, there is a glen of trees that actually grow up like this. So it does look like 2 legs coming up, And then we went through, and then we found this huge boulder, about 20 foot long, this huge stone, which is Scotia's Grave. And right near it is a little stone circle. Yeah.
Well,
And
straight into Google Maps, and so I've saved it so that next time I am.
Well, I don't want you'll all be going there now.
Yeah,
Well,
and everybody who's on the call I've typed it into the chat. You can put it into Google Maps so you can have a look at it.
And a councillor, I didn't realise, but a few years ago, a councillor was also enamoured by Scotia, because this for me was around I don't know, might be 1995, I'm not sure. But just in the last few years, he became quite enamoured with it, and he actually got the council to build a statue of Scotia at the bottom of the mountainside. You have to go up. But again, if you don't know where you're going, it's very difficult to find it, because there's just a sign pointing off into the distance, really, you know. But that would be one of my favorite places. But it's hard to pick, because wherever you are, if you're connected, you feel the presence. It's just that there are so many places here in Ireland where that energy, that liminal space, is so apparent.
Yeah.
The veil is so thin.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've seen over the years with the women coming on pilgrimage is quite often they will fall down and cry in a place, and they don't know why. And it's because they're bringing their ancestors home. Because so many left and couldn't come back, and knew that they wouldn't be able to come back. But they told their stories. They held that sorrow and pain. That came down through the ancestry. That's in our blood. That's in their bones. And when they cry, their DNA is going into the earth. And so they're literally bringing their ancestors home. And so then we will hold space for that woman. And if she knows the names, we will call out the names. We will let the land know they are home.
I've got full body chills from that, Amantha. Oh my goodness. And you know, your work is so popular in America especially, you know, huge amounts of people of Irish ancestry in the US who feel that calling, that connection to home, even though, you know, they may never have been there, their parents may never have been there, and yet there is this really strong sense of the call of the land, the sense that we had, but it's just a couple of generations further along, but it's still there.
Yes. And I can see Stephanie here. She just gone?
Stephanie?
There you are, Stephanie brought a group over a few years ago.
A few times.
We walked a while twice. Yeah, we walked a while together, didn't we?
Yes. Yeah, I was thinking about the magical fairy glen that you take us to. I don't remember where it is, but that was really special. And when we stayed at that wonderful house near, I think it was near Kerry, near the Stone Circle, it was a big old manor house, and I got lost, and I swear the fairies sent me astray. I just went out and took a walk and got lost, and we were getting ready to do a ritual back at the house, and I couldn't believe it. I kept walking past the driveway to the house, and I couldn't see it, and it dawned on me. I'm like, it's the fairies. They're doing this to me. And finally, I saw someone in our group, and I went running to her and found my way back to the house. And you were on the porch, and I remember saying to you, like, I got lost. I wasn't that far away, and you were like, yes, that was the fairies. They led you astray. And I was just like, that was the craziest adventure.
Yeah.
And there was just so many great adventures. I would just say anybody who is interested in taking one of Amantha's pilgrimages, it is magical. You will be changed forever. It's just wonderful. And Amantha's just really a wonderful teacher.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Helen.
Yeah, thanks. So my question is about how do you recommend approaching sacred sites? I have a number of them in Anglesey where I live, and I come into Ireland to visit some sacred sites. And, you know, I have my own ideas about how to approach it to sort of get into a right brain state of mind. But I'd love to hear from you how you would recommend approaching.
And I just, yes, and how I was shown is how I can share that with you. It might be what you resonate with, and it might not. So for me, before I go to a site, and if I know the place, I will actually start feeling the energy of that site. I will see it in my mind's eye, and I send out the energy, and I ask permission. And I've learned that over the years, because there've been some places I've really wanted to go, and I feel like, oh, you know, there's something's pulling me back, and I push through it, and I get there, and for some reason I can't get in. Either the farmer's closed it off for something, or, you know, and I've realized sometimes it's nothing to do with us personally, but the stones have their own work to do at that day, you know. And so I always attune before I go to the place. And then once I go, I always look to see if there is gatekeeper. And the gatekeeper could be a stone, it could be a tree. Sometimes it's literally a gate. And I always stop and I ask permission. I ask permission to enter the site. And I just wait and feel. And if it feels yes, enter, I give thanks and I step in. And then and some people don't or, you know, agree with this, but how I was shown by my granny is you walk around it anti-clockwise 3 times on the outside. And as you do that, she said, it's like opening a can, opening a tin, you know, you do it that way. So it's opening the energy. And as you walk around, you're asking permission and you're moving from looking to seeing and from listening to hearing. So you're moving into the space of the place you're moving into. So you're not taking you in there, but you're actually opening yourself to be aware of the energy that you're moving into. And then when you step in, if it is, for example, a stone circle, it might be a megalithic tomb. But if it, for example, is a stone circle, then I step in and then I walk once around the inside, touching the stones very gently. Just again, asking permission, thanking them for letting me be here. And then I will go back to whichever stone resonates with me. And I will lie on the stone or put my forehead on the stone. And I will just go off into dream time. So for me, I will often be taken into what happened in that place at other times and spaces. Some people will feel an energy, a vibration. Some people will hear a frequency. And they feel the need, or they feel the draw, rather than anything else. They feel the draw to respond to that sound by giving back sound. So it's really finding the way that it resonates with you. It's your way. And then before leaving, always to leave a gift. And the gift that I was shown is my spit or my wee or some hair from the nape of my neck. And I know now that that's all carrying my DNA. I didn't know it at the time, but I know it now. And of course, that also means shamanically that you can journey back there because your DNA is in that space now. And also when you go another time, the energy will recognize you because you've left something there.
Thank you for that question, Helen. I would never have thought to ask that in a million years. And thank you for that answer, Amantha. That was really something. Wow. Mary, we have a question from you. And just to say that we are coming up on time. So.
Oh, okay. Hi there, Lucy. Thank you so much for Womancraft Publishing. Amazing. And then Amantha, I purchased your book a couple years ago. And then when Lucy said you're going to be on this one, I was like, oh, this is wonderful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you
so much for Amantha for sharing this with the world. You were ahead of so many in your generation. Thank you. And
thank you.
It's beautiful. I have Irish ancestry, and we have Kerry butter and cheese that comes to America, right?
Yes, Kerry
Colorado. Yes,
yeah.
it's so good. And a couple years ago, one of the packaging on the slices of cheese from Kerry, the lady on the back, which is a local from Kerry, I was like, that looks like me. So my ancestry, there's a high probability I might come from Kerry.
There you go.
Isn't that neat? And so my question is, in your book, is the power body exercise about how to protect yourself on a daily basis, especially when you're doing, like, you know, the energy work. The power body is a body of energy that we build up around us to hold our space and protect ourselves from energy surrounding us. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Ask me specifically, what is it you'd like to know on it?
Do you still continue that? Do you still continue that practice when you protect your energy?
Yes, absolutely. I've been doing it for a long time now. And so all I have to do is focus on it and I know it's there. It's very
okay.
rare that it isn't. It's like washing your teeth or brushing your teeth. You know, when you do it every day and you go to bed one night, you're very tired and you think, did I brush my teeth? Well, I've been doing it for 40 years. I'm sure I did, you know, and you can get up the next morning and you see your toothbrush is damp, you know. It's something that can become a habit, become a ritual, because habits can move into rituals. And so the more you do it, the more you hold it. And the only time it breaks down is if you, number one, are not doing it, but also number two, if you have an investment in something. So if you have an investment in that person liking you, or if you have a fear of standing in your own power, of what people will think about you or anything of that type, you know, the whole thing around investment, getting caught up in other people's realities is really big. And it's especially big at the moment. You know, every person is a soul on a journey. Every single person on this planet is a soul on a journey. And before we come back into this realm, we make contracts with other souls that we will play roles in their lives and they will play roles in our lives. And it's really hard sometimes to recognize that actually our worst petty tyrant can often be our deepest soul connection. But they have taken on that role because of our need to grow. This is part of our soul's journey upon our spiral path, our growth. And so when you begin to recognize that, you stop reacting to other people. You stop blaming other people. You stop needing other people's either permission or that they think better of you or anything of that nature. Because you begin to recognize that actually you are whole unto yourself. Your perfect partner is always yourself. And the more you react, the more you need to learn to grow. The more your soul needs you to recognize what you haven't yet taken on. So when you react to somebody, that's actually an image back to you of what it is you are needing to grow through.
Yes.
And when you begin to recognize that, your power body gets even stronger. Because you begin to be aware that you choose not to let other people use your energy, train your energy, take your energy, or for you to leak energy. And so holding the presence of that around you doesn't stop you from connecting with other people, but it does stop other people from perhaps draining you and also from you losing energy. Yeah.
Thank you
Oh,
so
thank
much,
you.
Amantha.
Thank you so much. I will incorporate that in my daily ritual starting tomorrow.
Yeah, and I would suggest you do it when you wake up. Take a few minutes to, first of all, just breathe into your body. Make sure you're at home. Because sometimes we get up and our body isn't at home yet, you know, and it's following us around all day. So make sure you're at home. Put your hands on your belly. Just breathe and relax. And then just begin to pull in your pelvic floor, your what you call in America the Kegels. Pull the energy up. Feel it around you. And then when you get out of bed, take it with you. Every time you open a door, every time you have a drink, every time the phone rings or somebody calls your name, be aware that it's there. Before you answer, be aware that your body is intact. Every time you go shopping, every time you get into a car, out of a car, be aware of holding your power body. You'll notice the difference, especially in supermarkets. Yeah, you really do. People tend to be just that little bit further away from you, you know? Yeah, and I remember years and years ago, and this is a long time ago, but one of my kids was at school, and do you know how women gather outside the school and they chat? And I kind of never really fitted in. I was never kind of, you know, one of those. And there was one woman who used to come over and she used to talk to me, and I used to think, how does she do that? How does she get through my power body? And this is, you know, over 30 years ago. But she would just and she was the nicest woman, lovely woman, but completely, you know, uninvolved in anything esoteric or anything of that nature, and a kind heart, kind heart. And I think she felt sorry for me because I'd be standing on my own. But I actually liked being on my own because I find it very hard to make small conversation. I don't know what to do with that, you know. So I'd actually rather be on my own than pretend. But she's the only one ever that's ever been able to do that, you know. Yeah.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much, Amantha. And I'm aware we've got quite a few new people joining us. So I think people were, because we've recently, in the last month or so, changed over to British summertime. And so I think people might be expecting us to start now, when actually I'm afraid we're coming to an end. But you will get the recording tomorrow, so that you will be able to watch the whole thing from the beginning. But I think that must be what happened, because we do have quite a few new people joining us. So I'm very sorry for that. Yeah, but I don't make up time. So Amantha, I would love it. I just want to, whilst we're talking about energy and that, to thank Sarah Robinson and Lee Miller for being here and holding space with and for us as well.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Lee.
Holding the circle for us. Very, very grateful for that. So I would love, as we have come up on the hour now, if you could share the poem you said you were going to read, and the words of the woman who let you know how much that meant to her.
Yes, so it was just a few words that came to me when we were putting the book together, and I was telling Lucy before we started that I had an email from somebody telling me that she was reading these words every day, and every day it was really helping her to get through the process that she was going through at that time, because she was in a very dark place, bless her heart, within herself. And she found it to be of great solace, but also helping her to be who she was, to own herself, rather than trying to make it into something that she wasn't. Because it's quite hard sometimes, especially if you are in grief, for example, to allow yourself to stay in it. It's so easy to move away or to want to move away, but sometimes we need to allow ourselves to sit in it, to be a part of it, to let that process move through us. And so that's what she found. So I'll just read this. My bones still remember the freedom of life's dance. My blood still tastes the sweetness of my choices. And in the silence of my hidden screams, my foremothers whisper, awaken, arise, and reclaim all that you are meant to be. I am she, I am me, I am you. Witch, wild and tender, mother, strong and holding, child, innocent and open, Kalyak, knowing and rebellious to the end.
Fabulous. Thank you, Amantha. Thank you all for being here with us. The next book club, I'm just trying to get it up on my thing so I get the date right for you, is July the 11th, and it's going to be Wild and Wise. So we're going to have Amy Wilding with us, talking about meditation and the sacred feminine. So that should be a great interview and session together, and I have a feeling she'll probably do one of the meditations for us, so we'll get to sit in ceremony too. And just a reminder that currently on pre-order at the moment is Alice Grist's Soulful Pregnancy. So if you know anybody in your life who is pregnant at the moment, then it's a beautiful, soulful, spiritual, creative guide to pregnancy week by week. So if you've got anyone in your life. So thank you so much for your time. I'm going to be disappearing off now and watching the second.
Can I just say something, Lucy? Yeah. I did want to share a journey with you, which I have, of course, haven't had time, but I would ask you if you go to YouTube and there's something called The Earth Dreams. And I really feel how important that is right now for all of us to dream with the earth. And it's something that for many, many, many years I did every night before I actually videoed it. So yeah,
Beautiful.
if you would, that'd be
Thank you,
lovely.
Amantha.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lucy.
I'll get Lee to link to that
Thank you.
in the email tomorrow so that people can find that easily as well. Thank you all for your presence, and the recording of this will be sent out about lunchtime, our time tomorrow. Apologies again for those of you who thought that it was starting now, but you got a tiny little live glimpse of what happened. Hopefully you got exactly what you need right now, and you'll get the rest of it tomorrow. So thank you for your presence.
Thank you.